Hello students, this is Dr. Jayashri dealing with the picture of Dorian Gray, optional English 5th semester, Mangalore University, session 29. So let us have a recap of the textbook. Picture of Dorian Gray is a very powerful novel depicting the degradation of human soul. Soul and art are the major themes in the novel. Dorian falls victim to his own sense of narcissism and wishes he could remain beautiful forever, which surprisingly gets materialized in the course of the novel. In fact, at this juncture, there is quite a kind of transformation in his character. In chapter 3rd, 4th and 5th, you can see Lord Henry's growing influence on Dorian. As you know, Lord Henry, Basil Hallward and Dorian, so they make the points of the triangle, so to say. So Lord Henry considers Dorian's parents to be quite romantic. Lord Kelso was the grandfather of Dorian. Dorian's mother Margaret, she was quite beautiful. In fact, she got many proposals, but strange are the ways of love and matters of heart. This girl married a footman, a very poor person, penniless fellow. Lord Kelso wouldn't accept him as the son-in-law and he arranged for a duel. In fact, he instigated this man into a duel, and the person who was paid for it, he crushed him like a pigeon, referred to in the textbook. So, but the daughter came to know about it, and there was an estranged relationship between daughter and father, and the boy Dorian was born, and after some time she died. Dorian inherits his beautiful looks from the mother and property from the grandfather, but he didn't have a proper childhood, you can say, no guiding spirit as such, and he was he didn't like his grandfather as such. There was always a sort of distance between them. Another major theme in the novel is that of art and the artists. So there are many references to art in the novel. For example, after painting the picture of Dorian, Basil feels he has finally succeeded in painting Dorian in the new manner of art. See, earlier he used to paint Dorian in other surroundings, nature, Greek myth, that type background and all. Dorian in his own dress and all. So that is a different variation from his earlier form of painting. Now, he also says Dorian's presence, being introduced to Dorian has changed his outlook on life itself. So, in fact, he is afraid of his own worship of Dorian. Another major character, to which you are introduced is Sybil Vane. Sybil was a young girl, 17-year-old. She was working in a theater owned by a Jew. She played the role of Juliet, Desdemona, and Cordelia, all those Shakespearean heroines, and she had the capacity to transport the audience to the level of art. Now the surroundings were rather ugly and sordid, but she had that art in her. She was quite pretty to look at also. So as Dorian says, she was able to stir his imagination. So, but what happens? In the novel, like Echo in the Narcissus legend, Sybil Vane falls victim to Dorian's narcissism. Now, Dorian himself is not a great scholar or witty person, but he is constantly influenced by Lord Henry, right? he his sense of beauty was awakened by looking at his own portrait by Basil Hallward, and Lord Henry's witticisms, together with his charm and his own wealth, they sort of make him vain and shallow. Very paradoxically, he considers other people or lesser art to be shallow. That he is able to sense, as you will see later. Next, Lord Henry and Basil discuss Dorian. So one day when they were talking in the studio, Dorian, says that he is in love with an actress. Like they ask him why he is not visiting them as frequently. Then he replies he has found his love and wants to marry her. These two people discourage him. So they say, what about you? And Basil especially says, what about your wealth? Immediately Lord Henry says, it is not about marriage. He is only about to be engaged. I mean, he is in love. He will get many love. Many people who will love him in the future. Dorian, say your first love. Say from the beginning itself, Dorian is misled by Lord Henry in a way. But Dorian is all praise for Sybil. But then Basil says, okay, if the girl has the ability to transport you, she deserves your love. Let it be. To spiritual one's age, that is something worth doing. This is by Lord Henry. Okay, if this girl can give a soul to those who live without one, if she can create the sense of beauty in people whose lives have been sordid and ugly, she is worthy of your adoration. So finally, they decide to meet Sybil Vane. Prior to that, they had been engaged. Dorian Gray and Sybil Vane had been engaged. Engaged in the sense they proposed to each other. Dorian kissed her. There are some references. What happens? No? Till that time, Sybil was a very young girl, very innocent, untouched by the world. See, her interaction with Dorian sort of turns her dizzy, from our analytic viewpoint. So, Basil and Lord Henry accompanied Dorian to the theatre. Sybil was a complete failure that day. That day, she was not able to act. Probably she was in a delirium, height of passion. See, her love for Dorian burned in her heart. So, she suddenly realized, say the Romeo, is enacted by a, stout person. Okay, she realized that the scenery was ugly. All in all, the love which she had to enact on the stage and the love which she felt inside her heart, they are so different. And she also understood that art, however fascinating it is, cannot really represent reality. She saw the unreality of love. The reality of love and the unreality of art. But what happened? Dorian felt so much offended. See, that day Sybil's acting was so bad that even the ordinary people began to leave the theatre, and he rejects her that day. He asks her, "Are you ill?" Then she says, "No, I am well. But I have realized the futility of art. Please take me away from these surroundings." And Dorian outrightly rejects her. So he says, "See, I loved you because you were able to transport me. You stirred my imagination. What are you now? A third-rate actress with a pretty face." So this makes Sybil Vane so unhappy. She becomes painful, and she virtually pleads with him to not to leave her. And she also says, "I will correct," etc. But Dorian has become a moron by this time. So he says, "I will never come to see you," etc. That day itself, Sybil commits suicide. I mean midnight. After leaving the theatre, she again says, "I have to go back," and she takes a poison. There is one more parallel episode here. Sybil Vane had a brother called George Vane. he not George, James, okay, so he was about to go to Australia. So before going that, he sort of gets an inclination of his sister's love, so he becomes suspicious of this Prince Charming, because even though he was younger to Sybil Vane by 1 year, so he knew the ways of the world. So he says, uh, you know, if anything harms you, I will not leave you. I mean, if I will not leave this gentleman, like that. There is another episode. So this Dorian feels very unhappy, feels very painful about art, bad art shown by Sybil, and he wanders all over the streets and finally reaches his house late, and in the next day he wakes up late. He feels as though he had taken part in a tragedy. The dim figure of Sybil was there. Then, but before that, he had written a very passionate letter to Sybil, to asking her forgiveness and all. But later he comes to know that she was dead. Lord Henry comes and asks him, are you all right? Then he says, I am okay, I will marry Sybil Vane. Then, marry, don't you know that she is dead? Then this Lord Henry consoles him by telling that Sybil Vane is different, she was an artist. Even I have loved many people, but no one has given her love for, life for me. So of course Sybil was not a good artist, but her last act, that is her death, was a beautiful tragedy. He convinces Dorian that he need not feel guilty. You can see a marked contrast, okay, between Basil Hallward and Lord Henry. Basil comes the next day and tells Dorian, he expresses his sympathies. Then Dorian says, what are you speaking about? Yesterday I went to opera. Then Basil feels so shocked. You went to opera when Sybil Vane was dying. Her body was not even cremated, and you can speak of the other beautiful women. Then Dorian says, that was a work of art. Finally, Dorian is able to convince Basil also. He says, yesterday if you had come, you would have seen me in pain. It is not that I have pained for Sybil, but she took a rash decision, all those. Then Basil asks, give me the portrait, I have to make some minor changes. Then immediately Dorian refuses it. Now here you have to remember one thing. The previous day when Dorian had come, suddenly he happened to look at the picture, and there was a look of cruelty, sinister look about the lips of the portrait. And Dorian looked at his own image. It was as red and beautiful as ever. The lips were nothing had happened to the lips. Suddenly he comes to know, he remembers the wish he had made earlier. During the dawn also he looks at the picture, and the picture had remained unaltered. The look of cruelty was still there. Then he realizes that the wish had become true. From now onwards, the picture will keep on changing. So that way the picture is a very important presence in the novel. So he decides to hide the picture from others. Meanwhile, there is one more episode wherein he asks Basil, because Lord Henry had earlier told him, see, just ask Basil why he wouldn't exhibit the picture. And when Dorian asks, Basil sort of trembles. Finally he confesses his adoration for Dorian, and feels that he needn't have confessed it. He shouldn't have confessed. But Dorian feels happy. He wonders whether he will worship somebody else the way Basil had worshipped him. So in future also Dorian will be worshipped by many, whereas Dorian himself is incapable of loving anybody, just like a true narcissus. Anyway, next day, Dorian hides the picture from others. When Basil asks, "Why are you not showing the picture to me?" he says, "There is something fatal about a portrait." See, these lines turn out to be prophetical, okay, about a portrait. It has a life of its own. Dorian's sins start multiplying, his secret life begins. So, from this time onwards, Dorian's sins keep multiplying, and he leads a very degraded life, step by step. His insensitivity, immorality, and self-centeredness keep on increasing. So here you may get some questions. Why didn't Dorian learn anything from the change of the picture? So this is very curious thing in the novel. Instead of learning a lesson from the portrait, Dorian keeps on repeating the same mistakes. In a way that is a punishment. I mean, maybe a divine ordinance. This is one inexplicable theme in the novel. Like Dorian is not given any scope for redemption in the beginning. Later it is too late. We can draw conclusions like that. Multiple choice questions are there. So all in all, the session is about the increasing hideousness on the part of Dorian, and he perpetuates the tragedy of Sybil Vane, his one and only real love in the novel. So by killing Sybil Vane, Dorian kills his own consciousness, his soul in a way. This is very important theme in the novel. Actually, from this episode onwards, Dorian keeps on hurting, killing the spirit of many people. First Sybil Vane, next Basil Hallward, next Alan Campbell. Whoever comes into contact with the Dorian, except Lord Henry, they get hurt by Dorian's presence in their lives. In fact, their lives get destroyed due to Dorian. Okay, we will discuss them in the next slides. Thank you.